one design position open at Marketo, and I want to hire you all, so we're going to do Hunger Games. The weapons will be on the second floor. All right, this is Pete. I started designing in 1995 in New York City. I started a web development company because I knew HTML, and we were getting many thousands of dollars in 1995 if you knew HTML. And so I started a company, and we grew it to about 30 people, and it was all very exciting. And then planes hit some buildings, a couple like a mile away, and all the customers disappeared, and well, that didn't end well. Anyway, so I moved to California, and then I saw this job for interaction designer, which I thought was just shocking that somebody would pay me that kind of money to do that work, which I thought was so much fun. Like, that wasn't a job, that was like being paid to play tennis or baseball or something. So I loved that job even though the company was terrible. Sometimes it's important to just get the job first and not worry about the company being great, but that company was awful. Bad engineering, bad sales. But I loved the job. It was, interaction design. And then I joined Marketo in 2007 as the first employee, and I did a lot of roles. I installed their Exchange server, I built the desks, I trained the customers, I designed the software, I did the product management work. Whatever needed doing, I just did all of that stuff. And now we're about 700 people, and it's kind of fun, I get to do what I want to do, and we still design fun software. All right, that's me. Before we get started, I just want to define what I mean by UX design. So all of a sudden, like a whole bunch of new people just came in and some people confuse UX with UI, and I see a lot of times it says UX/UI. And even when you say UX, I think people get confused about what exactly that is. So UI, not UX, UI is just user interface. It's the part people press buttons, where are those buttons, what do those things say. UI, I think of synonymous with interaction design. UX is so much more than that. Guys, there's more, well, a couple more chairs over here in that row. Graphic design is its own particular skill, and being good at that doesn't necessarily mean you're good at user interface. And there's people who are great graphic designers, and they make things like print, like something that goes to be printed on paper and put in somebody's hands. All of these different things are part of a whole that, if you think about it, what is the totality of all those things? To give you a quick story, I used to use American Express. I went to New York City, and I was living here at the time, tried to use it, it declined. So I called them up, I'm like, what's the problem? They were like, well, it's fraud prevention. So you're out of state, we didn't want you to buy that. So I was like, okay, I just want to buy this thing, can you fix it? And they were like, sure, but before you do, I just want to ask you, are you interested in our American Express special fancy card? I was like, no, I just want to buy this thing. Well, what about this other service that we have? And I got so pissed off after about 10 minutes on the phone, I hung up, and I said, here, just take my Discover. They swiped Discover, it failed too. But instantly, my phone rang. I picked it up, and they're like, hey, this is Discover. Are you trying to buy something in New York City? And I said, well, yes, I am. And they said, okay, give them the card again, tell them try again. And I said, okay. And they said, I'll hold. It worked. They said, great, buy. And I was like, wait. Don't you want me to buy something? Don't you want to give me a pitch about something? And they were like, no, we just want to make sure it's you using the card. So I asked the person if they had scissors, because I cut up the American Express card right there. I've never used it since. It was 10 years ago. So UX is how they screwed up my experience with American Express through trying to sell me at a moment when I wanted to do something else. UX is about the point of view of the customer in their totality. It didn't matter what their rates were. It didn't matter what it cost. I don't care what their rewards program was. There was a moment they pissed me off, and that was the end of it. And UX, believe me, it lasts for a long time. You piss somebody off, you can write them off potentially forever. Whereas if you make them love you, you potentially have a customer for life. We'll get into some of those details. But when we talk about UX, I'm talking about the whole thing. I look for people who have all of these different sorts of skills, and truthfully, some people have more or less of different kinds of skills. Some people might be better at one thing, better at another, and I look at everyone as a unique snowflake. You're all very special, and that I try to say, well, what are they good at overall? Okay. By the way, this presentation, very often my presentations are very entertaining. This one is going to be a little bit more concrete because I really want you guys to get jobs. So if you have pen and paper, I guarantee I'm giving you things that you can do, and if you don't, it's going to make it harder for you to get the job. So it's going to be a little more concrete, it's going to be very specific. Part of getting a job of a designer is to actually be a designer. If you are not a designer, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting a job as a designer. So what do I mean by that? First, there's things about education. There's some people I actually met here. Who here actually is a General Assembly alumni? People. And anyone from Tradecraft? People like, there's these, they're like trade schools for design. There's also HCI programs and universities. Some universities have great outreach and I get their resumes a lot. Other ones, I don't get their resumes a lot. Like for example, there's a lot of people from Davis here. Any years from Davis? I don't get a lot of resumes from Davis. I don't know why, I just don't get a lot of them. Different programs and different schools are better. I'm actually finding that the education they're giving you all in the schools is not particularly great. But you know, I'm hoping that it gets better. And we'll talk some about that. Also self-taught. I never took a class in design. You know, I never had a mentor. I never had somebody show me. I had somebody saying, I'll pay you money if you do this, and if you do it better than somebody else, I'll give you more money, and that was incentive enough. You know, there was one point where I was interviewing for a job, and they said, you know, like, what is your education, and did you read any books? And actually, I was embarrassed, because at the time, I had not read any. So you should read books. Here are some books if you don't know what books to read. But if you're not reading books on UX, and you're just thinking that you know what you're doing, right, you're missing a huge amount of information. So these books are like Design of Everyday Things, Emotional Design, Universal Principles of Design, About Face. If anybody is a designer, reads About Face and tells me it's boring, then you're not a designer, right? It is like a manual of like how user interface works. There's a bunch of different books. Some are better, some are worse. You have to read these books. You don't magically have this information in your head. The next thing a designer has is a strong sense of empathy, not sympathy. Everyone has sympathy. Very few people have empathy. And it drives me a little bit crazy when people confuse them. So I made a nice chart here that will show you what is the difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is when you put yourself in their shoes. Empathy is what they feel, and understanding what they feel, and seeing through their eyes, not what you would do in their position. And I see that all the time, especially in executives. Executives will say things like, well, I don't think that that's intuitive, right? Or that doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't care. The question is, does it make sense to the audience who it's intended for, to other people? Empathy is hard, and we're not actually teaching our children how to do empathy in school very well, although I've been seeing a little bit more of that. You know, instead of saying, how would you feel if you were bullied? You know, let's say this kid is bullying another kid. How would you feel if you were bullied? But saying instead, how do you think Johnny feels when you bully him? The second is empathy. The first is sympathy, right? We need more empathy, because that's how you have great design. When you can actually be in the mind of the person who's using it and not be yourself. Because the truth is, you're way more technological than any of your audience. Way more. Everyone here has smartphones. My family on the East Coast, my dad literally this week got his first smartphone. He had a clam, shell phone for the longest time, and he hates the smartphone. You can't find somebody with a flip phone today, right? But in the Midwest, like, they still have landlines. Like, I haven't had a landline in years. You see, like, so there's oil and water. If you're not fascinated by that, if you're not fascinated by how does this work? I think all the time, how does a projector work? I don't really know, but I'm fascinated by it. If you're not looking at the world all around you saying, how does that work? How does this work? How did they make this? What happened here? If you don't view source of a website, if you don't want to click on things and figure it out, right? You're not a designer, right? This is just the mindset. This is who we are. We want to know how things work. And it was a funny thing. They had a test. I was at Intuit for 1 year, and they had a test from the design team. They handed out Casio watches, and they were brand new. And they said, okay, there's a $50 gift card for the winner. It's like 50 people, like this size group in the room. Whoever can set the current time first. And they said there's only one rule. There's instructions in the box. You don't have to read the instructions, you just have to open them. Right? As long as you open the instructions, that's good enough. You don't even have to read them. First person to set the time, go. Right? I came in second. I was very proud of myself. And it was over 5 minutes. Right? And the instructions were like this. And it was this giant map of like 0.0 font. And what was funny, it was like every instruction was in every language in like, I don't know how you describe it. So it's like Japanese, Chinese, English, French, Spanish, German of the first sentence. Then Chinese, Japanese, English of the second sentence. So like you had to like find the English, and it was just spread throughout the whole thing. And it was hard because it was really hard. Anyway, but that's everyone in the room wanted to know how to set the time. Like that's the point. You have to be a student of the whole world around you. Part of that is getting inspired by things that you see. Like the chair that you're sitting in. I love that chair, right? I love that chair. There's chairs, you can't see it. They look like these little snow cone things right outside the door, and they're just gorgeous. I saw this and I was like, not only is it so cool and inspiring, I was so, like, it's hard to see it. There's a light bulb hanging right here. It's a reading bulb, like to read. And then they made this edge come out so that the wire can come in. And then there's the plug. And I just got so inspired by that. And I wanted to pull that into something that I was doing. If you're not inspired by what you see, then you're not a designer. If you want to be a designer, you have to get inspired by all the things that you see. Good and bad. For instance, this is bad. This is the ceiling of an office in Marketo's building, right? I hate fluorescent lights. They have fluorescent lights. There's 3 lights, okay? So then I look on the wall, and this is what I see. So I say, okay, well, maybe that's how you turn off all 3 lights, right? And it literally, they were on, and it was like this, just to be clear, okay? Like it says, off, like, okay. So that turns off one of the 3 lights. Okay, so how do you turn off the other 2 lights? Anybody know?
Push the button.
Push the button.
Push what button?
The bottom part of the button.
That's not a button. People do that all the time. I watch people do it. No, this is a motion detector.
Yeah.
It's a motion detector. I see people do it all the time. They do this, they start kicking it, they do this a lot, like, and they're like, how do I turn it off?
Like, no, it's just a sensor.
No. Nobody gets this right. I mean, this is retarded. You go there and you slide down. What the hell is that? And okay, so then I go right to the next door, like literally one door next door, same 3 lights. And it's like, so people click here, that's nothing. This is the motion sensor. This does nothing. This does 2. This does 1. I think they're backwards, like, because there's 2 lines here. I don't know if you can see it. Everything is wrong. So then I walk right out of that room, and this is the thing that's on the wall. And I'm like, I don't even, like, there's no fan. There's no fan. None of this makes any sense. And if you are not just blown away by that sort of thing, you're not a designer. And if you're not laughing, usually you can tell a designer, they laugh at those things, but you should be picking up on them all the time. Little OCD things, like, I don't know if you read things like Fail Blog, but like the you had one job kind of things where there's one tile the wrong way. These are the things that should drive you crazy. And if they're not driving you crazy, you have to really reconsider whether or not you want to be a designer, because that's part of the job. Oh, there was something I want to do and I forgot to do it. Anyway, I was going to take a picture of me from the back and insert that slide. And not too late. You should go to meetups. This was the best I can come up for a meetup. I was like, what does a meetup look like? And I was like, oh. Anyway, But you should be going to places like this. Congratulations, you've all passed at least that test. But you should go to more of these, right? It's good to interact with people. It's a very, karma, pay it forward sort of world. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know who's going to introduce you to somebody else, and then that will get you into a gig that will lead somewhere else. You want to go to these things. If you stay at home, it's harder. It might not seem like it, but I am extremely introverted. This is exhausting for me, right? But I do it because it's important, because I'm looking for great designers on my team, and because maybe I can help somebody else out there, right? And that it doesn't matter if you're shy or introverted, mingling, like forcing yourself to go over to somebody and go, hi, I'm Glenn, and talk to people, you've got to do it. And you know who you are out there, where it's hard to do it, it's exhausting, but you get something out of it. These are the hard skills. Pick an Adobe product. I picked Photoshop. I don't know how to use any other Adobe product. I know how to use Photoshop. Right? You pick whatever one you want, but you need to have something in it. I believe that to be a designer today, you really need HTML, CSS, and some jQuery. I think it's very difficult to get a job without those skills. It's like everything that gets made out of those things. And if you don't understand how those things work, you're not going to be on the same page as the engineer. It's not going to work as well. Usually, on any interview schedule, there'll be an engineer. So if you can talk the basics, oh, I made a web page. I know how to do that. I can do some like jQuery. All of a sudden, they're like, okay, this is somebody I could at least have a conversation with. Okay, that's the existential part. There'll be questions at the end, but since you have one, yes.
What's your opinion on a tool like Sketch? As I know a lot of people use it as opposed to something like Photoshop. Do you have any kind of opinion on that?
Fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Like it's not. It's the results that are the point.
Right.
Right. I'm just saying that if you put Sketch on your resume, most employers will, most, not all, they'll be like, "What Sketch?" You put Adobe whatever on your resume, they're like, "Okay, checkbox." Right. It's hard if you say, "I only know Sketch and I don't know Photoshop." With that said, Photoshop's expensive and Sketch is cheaper. Is it free?
No, it's like $90, $80.
Oh, cheap. They're cheap. They're way cheap. But if you're a designer, let's imagine that what you were was a DJ, right? You have to buy something. You can't just be a DJ with no electronic equipment whatsoever. Let's say you want to be a guitarist. You have to buy a guitar, right? A decent guitar, a cheap piece of craft guitar is $100, right? You have to spend a little bit of money for your craft. If you want to be a designer, a little bit of money on Photoshop, maybe it's the right thing. They have the monthly, so it's like $10 a month. Yeah, you can get Photoshop for $10 a month. You can get the cloud for $50 a month, but again, you don't need the whole cloud. You just need one tool. Okay, now we're going to talk about actually getting a job, right? That was just about being a designer. The next part is to get in the door, get a job. The first part is applying. The most important channel is recruiters. If you send your resumes to like Monster and big job boards, I found that it was a very, you need high volumes. Like for every 1,000,000 resumes you send out, you get one back. Like it's pretty bad. But with a recruiter, if you get like 10 recruiters, one of them will send you on an interview. Recruiters, they're the people who are being asked about the jobs. Don't go to just one, go to multiple of them. Don't tell them you're going to multiple of them because they all want to feel like they're the only one in the universe, and like they have to feel special. But the point is that they're going to help you more than anybody else. There are actually UX specialized recruiters, like UX Talent. There's a few that contact me all the time, but they have UX specialties. They're good. With that said, job boards are still good. LinkedIn has become really great as a job board. I used to go to Craigslist, and then lately I felt like LinkedIn's better. But one of the ways that I think is most effective, and I would really suggest, is directly going to someone on LinkedIn. So I get messages from people all the time, and when I feel like someone really has thought through what they're saying, has something interesting to say, and they contact me, I pay attention to it. There's also something called inbound marketing. I use it, I'll explain how I use it, but then I'll apply it to how you should use it. I have a design spec that I polished up and made look nice. I put that on a landing page with a form in front of it. Then I went to Quora and I found all the questions like, hey, what does a design spec look like? And I said, funny you should ask, here's a blog post where I talk about it, and here's an example of one that we use in Marketo. I get about maybe 3 to 5 form fill-outs per day of that form. These are not people looking for jobs, they just want to see my design spec. And that form fill-out immediately sends an email alert to me and the recruiter who's helping me to fill the position. So I look at every single person's resume who fills out that form. Now that's when I say inbound marketing, it's saying I go to Quora to answer questions with some value, and I put the value behind a form so I know who it is. Now let's apply it to you guys. You guys want to find a job. If you look at the questions, and I'm picking on Quora, but it could be Stack Exchange, it could be, there's a UX Stack Exchange, there's all different sorts of places on the web. Find places where an employer goes, and then answer questions there. Try to answer, if somebody has a question about some design thing, try to give them some value. You can do that through comments, it's your time basically you're spending. So give them those comments, and then you'll find that there's employers mixed in with the other people like yourselves. And then that way you build up credibility. For a while on that UX Stack Exchange, I got really pissed off because they kept shutting down questions. I don't know how many of you know the site, but they shut down every question that's subjective, which kind of drives me crazy. But for a while I had like between like top 3, top 4 points on the site. And I was just answering lots of people's questions. It's because at the time I was either recruiting or looking, right? And that's what you have to do. You have to get out there and do things, and that's how it's not just building up karma, you're making connections with people. You also don't need to ask for a job. It's actually much easier. If somebody asks me for an informational interview, I'm probably gonna give it. If somebody asks me for a job, well, you know, there's a lot of work to do. We have to look at the site. I have to say it's a good match. We have to have an interview. There's a bunch of different people in the interview. But if somebody just says, I'd like to do an informational interview, it's easy, it's lunch. Internships, right? Mentoring, like, hey, I'm trying to do XYZ, I'd love your input. You know, people have written me letters and I email them back. I just saw somebody was showing me this app called, oh no, sorry, Rashid. This is Ethan, I think it's called. It's an app where it's just some guy and you ask him questions and he gives you answers. Like, hey, how do I look in this dress? It's like, it doesn't look so good to me. Like, but like, he's gotten thousands of people to download his app because he's just very honest and gives an answer. If you ask people questions and you get an honest answer, that's good. One request: don't write a book, right? If you write an email to somebody, keep it short. Get right to the point. People sometimes are just like, oh my God, I can't get through all of this to even get to what they're asking for. Sometimes there's no ask. It's just like, what do you think of me? Like, be more specific. Give me a chance to help. Now, when you do apply, for instance, on Marketo.jobs, you can click on the link and say, here's my resume and here's a cover letter. You'd be shocked at the cover letters of how poorly written they are. I mean, really poorly written, like grammar problems, like nonsensical sentences. It just doesn't tell a story, it doesn't flow. If you're trying to get a job, spend some time on it. Work on it. Show it to other people, see what they think, and go back and forth on it a few times. I sometimes get form letters from employees. You know, do you guys know what the Turing test is? Does anybody not know what the Turing test is?
Is it the Turing.com?
Turing, it's named after Alan Turing. He said artificial intelligence will have achieved its goal when a human cannot tell the difference between a human and a computer, you know, given just a screen. You know, like imagine instant messaging somebody, you know, like you've ever instant messaged a bot, you know it's a bot pretty quickly. But eventually computers will make it so you can't tell the difference. If you've seen the movie Her, that's that level. So I'm saying make the letters seem like it wasn't written by a robot. Make it seem like it was written by a person. So don't cut and paste things to me. And, you know, again, keep it short. The resumes, I'm shocked at how poorly written everybody's resumes are. I mean, you want somebody to read it, right? So why is it written so bad? Why are there like no punctuation? Why is there, you know, sentences that don't make any sense? please just take pride in the words that you put on your resume. This is you on one piece of paper. And if you're a designer, that piece of paper should be beautiful. I mean, really, it should be beautiful. Why shouldn't a designer's resume be beautiful? Spend the time on it. If you don't spend the time on it, I just assume you're not that serious about getting a job. I mean, I'm being harsh with you guys, but I get a lot of resumes, and every time I see one that's nice, and this is, I'm not saying every time I see one that's bad, I throw it away. I'm saying every time I see one that's nice, I put it immediately on the top. It's the nice one that is the special one. They're all crap. That's what, like, I'm telling you, it's not that hard. There's like thousands of people in the city trying to get jobs. You guys have this secret. Just make your resume nice, and all of a sudden you're on the top. Because everyone else's looks like garbage. Just a little detail. I talk about typography a lot, but don't use Times New Roman on your resume. Pick a decent font. There's like defont.com. There's a bazillion free fonts. Pick a nice font. What's Also, I've seen like 10-page resumes. You're not that special. If it gets to 2, you're pushing the envelope, right? Try to, and especially for you guys who are starting, in your career, 1 is plenty, and I don't need to know about high school jobs, right? Just keep it short. Don't go too long. Every single candidate I get, I immediately look up on LinkedIn. Immediately. This is what I find. No recommendations, no endorsements, no picture. And that when I click contact info and it says portfolio, website, blog, and I click them, they're broken. They don't go anywhere. Or it says Twitter, I click on it, and the last time you tweeted was 3 years ago. Right? What do you want to present to me? Is that what you want to present? I don't think that you want to. I think as a designer, you need to think about how you design you. Right? This is your presentation to the world, who you are. And what do you want to look like? Do you want to look like somebody who starts things and quits? Who like makes mistakes and doesn't check up on them? It's not how you're going to get the job. Right? And this is what I see all the time. All the time. Now, there's a lot of people who've worked places, and they were forced to do bad work. I understand that. But your portfolio is the one thing you can control, right? Nobody is your boss on your portfolio. You can make it look the way you want it to look. Now, one of the problems is you don't have that much work, right? That's okay. I'm actually looking at the site itself. I want to see, I got to make a site, and this is what it looks like. I'm not even saying you need to be creative and make up something that's great. You know the expression, great artists, good artists borrow, great artists steal? This is actually the original quote, which I thought was funny because it was about poetry, not about art. But I'm saying go to Google, type in great UX portfolios, and steal one that you like. Because that's good enough for me. Just knowing the difference between crap and great, like that tells me if you steal something, first of all, I'm not gonna even know. But even if I did know, I'd be like, oh look, they have nice taste. Like that's what I need. I need somebody who has taste. So imagine working is like it's at a restaurant, right? I'm the executive chef and I need some sous chefs, I need some line cooks, I need some people who are gonna work. And what do I need most? People with a decent palate. I need people who can taste. Because what do I need somebody who's like, oh, it tastes fine and it's too spicy or salty, they're gonna ruin my restaurant. That's what I'm looking for in UX. I want people with taste. I want people who can say, this doesn't look good or this looks great, and they have that good palate, that good UX palate. So I'm saying, steal it, I don't care, just don't have a lame site. And I guarantee most of your sites are lame. Right? And again, just go back to, you're a designer, design you. And your portfolio is you. It's the thing you can control. You can't control how LinkedIn does its layout, right? You can control a resume, but most people aren't looking at that, right? They're going to come to your website. Part of it is, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was hoping you would elaborate more on lane portfolio. Are there factors you're looking at, or are you talking about more the visual look and feel?
Yeah, I think I'm going to cover a few of those things.
Okay, I'll
I
wait.
think. If I don't, I'll come back to it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the first piece of it, yeah, I am going to cover it. Typography again. Thank you for CSS3 that we can embed a font. Like, when I first started, you got Times New Roman, you were happy. That was it. There was no font choice. There were no tables. Netscape 1, Mosaic, it had no capabilities whatsoever. Today, you can embed a font. That's wonderful. And you know what? Typography, it's like some weird lost art. Nobody cares for some reason, and they're picking all these just like generic fonts. But you can embed a font into your site very easily. Google Fonts just makes it so simple. They've got a million different fonts. Pick one. Pick one. I care. I'm looking at your sites. I'm evaluating you guys, and if somebody has a decent font, I'm absolutely putting you on the top of the list. And if you have Times New Roman or you have Arial, go on to the bottom. It's just the real thing. I also want it to be easy to read. Uppercase is bad. Italics, uppercase is even worse. Uppercase, like doing it like this where it's yellow on top of purple, that's hard to read. Light gray on top of dark gray, that's hard to read. Why are you trying to like strain my eyes? Make it easy for me. Like, this is a reading usability. Have decent spacing. Like, I see all this text that's all squished. The CSS for that is line height, right? You make the line height a little bit bigger, it's easier to read. Don't make sentences that go all the way across a very long monitor, right? Have them together. Make it easy for me. Why would you want to make it hard for me? I say me, and you guys understand, I'm talking about just all employers, right? Why would you want to make it hard? Right? Make it easy. Your portfolio should be somewhat interactive. By that I mean, have a sensible information architecture. I'm not trying to get complicated here, but there's a bunch of sites that I was just at recently, and I was just like, I don't even know where to go. Things that I think are supposed to be clickable aren't. Like, that's the affordances thing. Like, if it's a button, make it seem like that's what I'm supposed to click on. It's just a portfolio site. This isn't rocket surgery. Just make it simple to get through. And then if your site is broken up into some ways, test it on somebody. Say, does this make sense to you if I break this up this way? Right? We're all people. And if it's confusing to the first 3 people you show it to, it's probably confusing. Right? So just minor testing, but it makes a huge difference. So it doesn't need to be crazy interactive. I saw one where literally you press the right arrow and this little animated guy ran across the screen and ran up and the thing moved all over. It was fascinating, and it was all HTML5. I'm not even asking for anything that crazy. I'm just saying don't make mistakes with it. Don't make it where it says about, I click on it and nothing happens. Also, I just rejected a resume a few days ago. It had an iPad, like that's what I was looking at it on an iPad. And I clicked and clicked and clicked and nothing happened, so I closed the browser and didn't look at it again. Test it on an iPad, test it on a phone, right? I look at the device that I have in front of me. That's either something that fits in one hand, something that fits in 2 hands, or a laptop, and that you don't know what I'm gonna be on at the time. So just make sure it works on everything. Like I talked about the restaurant where you guys are cooks, right? Designers are like chefs, right? You're cooking things. And that the ingredients are things like process maps, wireframes, a wall of sticky notes. Who here on their site has a wall of sticky notes? It's fine. It is just, it's an ingredient, right? If I was a chef and I said, come to my restaurant, we have corn and flour and eggs and milk and we mix it up in neat ways. Like, that's not gonna entice you in. You want it to be, you get chicken parmesan, you want the full meal. So I wanna see the actual thing you make. It's fine if you show, and here's the process I used to get there, that's okay. But if you don't show the final thing, then I'm just looking at a bunch of raw ingredients and I don't know what you did with them. I don't know how many times I've seen this. They have screenshots of the final work and they're super small. And I'm just like, I don't know if it's good. It's so tiny, right? Give me a full-size screenshot so I can look at the thing. Even if it says, please request a password and I will give you then access. When I was looking for a job, that's what I did. I put all my stuff behind a password. I said, if you want it, here's one thing. If you want to see more, ask me and I will, and I'll give you the password. And the reason is because there was some stuff in there that people didn't want me to share just totally publicly. But it's also a form of inbound marketing. They want to see the stuff. I give them a password. They sent me their email. I can then follow up with them. Hey, what did you think of my portfolio? Right? So there's nothing wrong with that. That inbound marketing thing works. You give something of value in exchange for something unique. Contact information is pretty much the main thing. Last thing is that if you don't have something in your portfolio that you're like, that's cool, right? I like that. Then you're failing in the job to present yourself, right? You need something. And honestly, on the phone, I often ask them, help me out here. Show me just one thing that you think is super cool here, right? And I often get a lot of hand waving. So, like, just think about that one thing. Give me at least one thing that you think is cool and can have some reason why it's cool. Now, for a bunch of you, you don't have any designs to show, right? I mean, just realistically, you haven't worked in a bunch of places, you don't have much to put on your portfolio, so you're like, what the hell do I put here? All I have is this stuff that I did, you know, like, which is just process stuff. I don't have anything finished. So my advice to you here is that if you really want to be a designer, right, you have to make a leap of faith, and you have to go design something. Doesn't even matter what. I'll give you something for free. I want an app that goes on my phone called Told You So. I really want this app. And that when I think that like the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl, and that my friend says, oh, you're crazy because they suck and have sucked for 40 years, and I'm like, no, but this is the year. I want to have an app where I go, the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl, and I said on this date, I put my fingerprint on it, and then they sign it as well, or maybe bump it with their phone or something, and then later, when they actually win the Super Bowl, I could be, told you so. Okay? Like, come up with something. I had actually made an app, when I was looking for work, I made an app which was, it's synced to your Salesforce. If you were a sales rep, it got down your leads, and that it would do this search through Facebook and LinkedIn and blog searching and say, for this one person, this is everything that I can tell you about this person. That there was press releases with their names on it, and there was a comment by that person on this post, so that when the sales rep talked to the person, they would have something to talk about, right? And I just made it. I was actually trying a new tool out too. I tried some prototyping tool. So just make something up. I don't care. Just show me that like you can design something, right? Make a leap of faith. If you don't have something and you're waiting for somebody to pay you so that you will have something, right? I don't think that you want it enough. If it's really Hunger Games, you're going to go out there and design something that you think is great, and put it on your portfolio. I don't care that somebody paid you to do it or you just did it on your own. To me, it's actually more impressive if you just do it on your own. That's cool. That shows me that you've got spirit, moxie. If you blog or tweet and stop, like, oh, I tried blogging, but I haven't done it in 6 months. Just take the blog down, right? It's more embarrassing than it's worth. It shows that you're a quitter, right? Just take it down. If you have Twitter and you're like, yeah, I tweeted 12 times, just delete the account. Because I'm going to find it, and I'm going to see this information. So first of all, don't blog anything embarrassing, don't tweet anything embarrassing. But if you're not going to continue with it, delete it, right? If you're gonna do it, then do it. And I'm not talking about blogging like every single day. You can blog like once or twice a month. That's fine, as long as there's a regular cadence. And it's something interesting. If you don't have anything to blog about, I think that you're not paying attention to the world. Like every single day, something happens. Every single day, it's like, I was having lunch and somebody was talking about self-driving cars. So like when I got back to the office, I was like, self-driving cars. What would happen if you got in an accident? Does it immediately call the police? Does it also tell your insurance company? Like I'm thinking all these questions about self-driving cars. And I just literally just put a whole bunch of questions. And that was a blog post. Like it doesn't, There's no like blog police that's gonna come after you if your blog post isn't, good enough. And honestly, if you blog 100 times, maybe 5 of them are really interesting, right? That's okay. It keeps your writing skills up. I definitely recommend it. Twitter, not as much because it's so condensed. But at the same time, if you see somebody tweeting and they're retweeting a lot of other designers and that they're going to events, you can see engagement through them. Especially with pictures, that sort of stuff. But the key thing is don't show that you're a quitter. If you aren't doing it, take it down. If you are doing it, that's fine. All right, moving along. What's our time, by the way? How are we doing on time? 7:51. What am I targeting? Just keep going.
Keep going, you're fine.
All right. In most interviews, the interview is over in 10 seconds. Have you guys read Blink? Anybody who has not read Blink? All right, it's worth reading, but here's the basic idea. Our brains have 2 parts. The conscious part that takes a while and wants to get to know you. And the subconscious part that works really, really fast. This is the part that if you throw a ball, you catch it. And that your conscious part can't figure that out. That's way too complicated. That's like trigonometry and motion and stuff. Your subconscious just goes there and get it. In interviews and in this book, they talk about how they would do these tests. And they would say, here's just meeting somebody for a few seconds, and here you get a half an hour, and here you get an hour. And then they did evaluations of how good they thought the candidates were. And then they asked them again 6 months into the job. And it turns out that you have no real greater insight after 30 minutes than you do after 10 seconds. That your brain is good enough to know if somebody's going to be good at their job in 10 seconds. And so when you go in, make the most of those first few seconds, right? You don't go and be like, hey, and jump in their face, right? You don't want to go in and be just like, oh my God, I'm just kind of freaking out. You don't want to be, super sad, right? You don't want to be so, I just interviewed somebody who's like this the whole time. Just calm down, it's all going to be okay. And, but I knew right away. Or like, I hope it doesn't, check in my car. The most important thing, you want to be authentic, be yourself. There's a nice quote by Bruce Lee. You are all unique snowflakes. Be yourself. You're all, I believe, have something to offer. But when you go into the meeting, you want to be confident, nice handshake. I literally, like handshakes, it's like, don't just sort of limp your hand. Like reach in, it's got to reach there. And honestly, if you have a bad handshake, say, can I shake your hand again? Because that was terrible. All right, this is a cheat sheet for the actual interview. But first, I'm going to condense a 2-hour thing I did not I did, but I sat in on a presentation about masterful conversations at Intuit. And that the whole thing was basically this. You should split your time between 3 basic activities in any conversation. The first is reflect. It's like, so what I hear you saying is that you X, Y, or Z. Reflect is, let me get this straight, and tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to mirror this back to you. That's all reflect. You should spend 1/3 of your time doing that. 1/3 of your time should be inquiry. So what do you mean by blah, blah, blah? Or that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. Inquiry is about asking questions. Ask questions about 1/3 of the time. And then 1/3 of the time, advocate for something. Like I believe this, I think I'm that. Mix it up. Most people spend all their time here and none of their time here, right? Reflection and inquiry is important. If you go to an interview and the interviewer is talking most of the time, you're doing well. Like you want them to be talking, right? And be engaging, keep them engaging. Like don't just listen to them blab the whole time. You have to make sure you get 1/3 advocacy, right? You can't just be, I didn't say a thing the whole time. But this is the balance, and it's important, and it really does make conversations go right. If you're really aware of yourself, the next time you have a conversation, just keep mental note of what's actually happening. Like even if you're in a group conversation, who's advocating? Who's asking questions, who's reflecting, and just see the dynamic. If you're a designer, right, the whole world gets a little bit brighter when you see what's happening. And this is exactly the kind of thing you should be paying attention to. Sometimes I ask the question, what is your design focus? And I'm trying to understand what kind of designer you are. And I usually get the answer of, I'm everything to everybody, please hire me. I would much prefer you said, this is what I'm good at, this is what I really love, and this is what I'm interested in learning. Because then I can understand. I understand what you're trying to do. I'm also asking other kinds of questions, like, I'll give you my answer. I love startups. I want to be the first person there. I want to make it from scratch. I want to make it before we have customers, right? I want to create something from nothing in a small group that's going to conquer the world. That's what I love. I don't really love mobile. I like enterprise. I actually like business apps more than I like consumer apps. I just feel like there's more there for me to work with, where consumer apps are very often polished and polished and polished. Like look at Ancestry.com. They work really hard to make their user interface perfect, and it does a certain amount of stuff. Marketo does way more stuff, but it's like the people are in it 8 hours a day, as opposed to Ancestry, which people are in it less often. Different design needs, right? I don't want to design Ancestry. I want to design more of a business app. That's my answer, right? Think about what your answer is. Consumer, mobile, even education design. There's lots of kinds of design, service design. Think about what your answer is, but don't just give me everything to, I don't want you to be all things to all people. I want you to be you. If you're truly you, you'll give an honest answer, and your answer can't possibly be, I can design anything in the world and I'm good. It just can't. And don't try to be like, I'm really hoping that what I say matches what they need. Think of it this way. If you're totally honest, and they are like, that's exactly what I need, right? That's going to be a good relationship. If you put on this mask of like, oh, I really like mobile because you're a mobile company, so I really want to do mobile. And they're like, great, that's what we need, and we hire you. It won't be a good relationship because you will have lied. And you really won't be that person. And then over time, they'll learn that, right? You want it to be a good, honest interaction, and that comes from thinking about what is it that you want. And if you're just saying, I don't know what I want, which may be the case, I would really challenge you and say, you gotta think more about this. Try these things. Try on your own time to make these things. But if you don't know, there's an old Greek saying, know thyself. What is that from? There's know thyself is in something.
The Matrix.
Movie. What is it?
The Matrix.
The Matrix, is that it?
Yeah.
Know thyself? Ancient Greek movie. Ancient Greek movie. So anyway, this is an important question, and it's so much more important for you to know than for you to be able to say. Know this about yourselves. I can't emphasize enough. If you don't know what you're good at, you're going to be unhappy. Right? If you know what you're good at, it'll give you direction and drive. Like I said earlier, I asked, who are your influences? Have influences. That one interview I was in, they asked, who are your influences? I had nothing. And he gave me a bunch of names to say, look, we're not going to hire you, but here's a bunch of good books you should read. And when I read these books, I was fascinated of how they became so influential in the way I design. Things that I did intuitively, they gave me words for. Like I didn't know the word affordance until I read about it. Right? I knew that something should look like you're supposed to click on it, but I didn't know what to say about these things. I didn't know how to teach these things. And that they became very influential. These are my answers. Don Norman, which this book actually is hugely influential on me. Where the first book, Design Everyday Things, made me want to be a designer for a living. Emotional design made me think that's the kind of designer I want to be. The one where people love the thing, like really feel emotional about it. But About Face and other Alan Cooper books, they really got into the nitty gritty and made me feel like I had control over this tool set that I was using. And there's other books like Predictably Irrational or other psychology books where understanding the human mind really helps me with interpreting empathy into action. I love those kind of books, and they're very influential for me. If you want to cheat, you can say this is your answer. But I would recommend that you read the books and find your own answers. sometimes people say Steve Krug. I don't think it's a good idea. That's the book I get for executives to say, like, here's a nice book that you can read about design, right? That's not a designer's book. That's like that's what you give the head of the department, right? It's not, I don't know, to me it doesn't work. Also, if you say Apple, just like, oh, Apple's a great influence, like, I don't know, that just seems like a cop-out. I use iTunes, I hate iTunes, right? The iPhone is a beautiful device. There's all sorts of different Apples, right? Be specific, if you're gonna pick them, be really, really, really specific. But they're just sort of the cop-out, you know, everybody likes Apple sort of thing. I ask why you. I'm basically looking for these answers. I want people who work hard, really hard, who are gonna like have energy and like push the ball forward. That really matters to me. I want people who are gonna absorb the culture quickly, right? Not just be disruptive to the culture. I want people who are easy to work with, right? You can come up with your own answers. I'm telling you that this is one of the questions that either they ask explicitly or implicitly, right? Have a decent answer of why you are better. And if they don't ask, say, before we end, I just want to let you know why I think I'd be a really good candidate. This is like when candidates ask you for your vote for Congress. They have to say why they think you should vote for them, right? They don't just get the vote automatically. They have to say why. And this is another one to think, why you? I'm giving you all these questions to help you, right, to be prepared for these interviews. Then I often do like a design exercise. Be prepared for a design exercise. Funny thing, people often make, like they say, okay, let's start sketching, and they make the box about this big. And I'm like, it's a whiteboard, make a big box. I just go further with it. I think hardly anybody ever says, here's an iPad version, here's a phone version, here's a browser version. It's very seldom that people like take those design exercises to an experimental, interesting place. It's usually that they're like, what is the minimum I need to do to accomplish the task? And it's not really what people are asking of you. They're asking you to be creative and do something a little bit more interesting. They will say, do you have any questions? It's like a standard thing in an interview. Have your questions in advance. Don't go, I don't know. Like, have questions, right? These are good questions. How do you think I did? It puts people on their heels a little, like, oh, well, right? And they'll be a little more honest than you thought if you say, how do you think I did? I had somebody ask me this question once, and I thought it was great, because the answer was exactly what I was looking for, right? The answer is always what they're looking for. So I always like that one. You should follow up. Send a thank you, handwritten, right? Send it snail mail. Be specific. It was great meeting with you. I love the conversation about blah, blah, blah. You can even deliver it personally. But I always pay attention to those, and those always get some extra points. Do you know that congressmen are like 10 times more likely to respond to you from a handwritten letter than from an email? It's because they say, well, they put the time in. They hand wrote it. This is vaguely what we're talking about of like what you should be asking for, right? The guy today, a few weeks ago, wanted like 3 times that much, and I was like, oh, that's not gonna happen. All right, so you're hired, right? What the hell? You want to make an impression. Have a great attitude, show up early. Listen, but be firm with your needs. Like if you're in a place and you're like, well, I need to do some research before I can design this, right? Be firm about that. You're not a slave, you don't want to be rolled over. Right in the beginning is when you want to be firm because it establishes patterns. And at the first couple weeks, patterns get set. So if you get rolled over in the first couple weeks, that's really bad news. So you got to be a little bit firm right then. And find common ground solutions. You don't want to be stubborn, right? Find something that will work for multiple people. This is the most important chart I show people about how to do good work, right, once you're hired. You have a pie chart of all the different decisions. And this is the part that you should care about. This is the part that everyone else should make their decisions. This is where you have to say, I am not going to make every single decision about this design. I'm going to find other people and get their fingerprints all over this gray area. This gray area is going to have fingerprints from everyone in the company. And this area is going to be exactly the way I think it should be. Because that's the part that really does matter. And think about the proportions here. It's just 5 or 10%. You can't have 50% be the part that you care about. It's not going to fly. In any organization, there's people who want to have their input. Right? So, but you got to separate what matters. I don't care what color the button is. You know, CEO, what do you think the color of the button should be? Blue? Great, great. It's going to be blue. Right? That doesn't matter. But it's like, what's the mental model? Like, that's the part that matters. What I did at Marketo is I established a bunch of design principles. And those design principles I taught to the executives, you know, like the CEO, the head of marketing, the CTO, and that they today, 7 years later, they use those design principles to throw in my face to say, oh, but wait, you can't move the cheese, right? And if I made a nice, you know, set of those things, and they're all like, you know, story-based. But the point of it all is that if you get those early and upfront, they become the patterns that will help you for the rest of your time. And then as you move forward, you should mentor someone else. What I'm doing to you and helping you now is what I wish somebody had helped me in 2003, 2004. And I didn't have anybody who did that. And think about the people that you could help, you know, in a couple of years. You know, you should mentor people. You should spend that time. When you make a nice portfolio, look to people who are in the room and the people that you meet and say, I can help you with yours. Right? We're not all perfect. You know, we're stronger when we're all together. And so think about that role that you have to play in the future. All right, questions?
So one of the challenges, from your perspective, how do you work with product managers, and what's your take between UX and PM, and how PM should work with UX people and how UX people should work with PMs?
You know, I was at a enterprise UX meetup, and there was a little round table called UX structure. And it was really interesting how in a very small company, the UX people said, well, I want to be managed by the head of product because I like him, and the CEO's a dick. Right? And a bunch of us who were in the bigger companies said that is a terrible, terrible idea. Because then you are managed by product management. And product management, they're not designers, and they are incentivized to ship, not to have a great UX. They want a great UX, that's great, just like they want high quality code. But they're not going to sacrifice the ship date to get high quality code or high quality UX. So it is crucial that UX and PMs are peers. So it goes PM, UX, engineering, we are brothers. We're all going to work on this as peers, and they all have independent deliverables. The PM's deliverables are the definition of the problem we're trying to solve. The UX deliverables is how we're going to solve that problem. And the engineering deliverable is the solution to the problem, being the execution. Right? If they all have that responsibility, then they all have stake, you know, they all have skin in the game. And they all influence each other. I mean, we're actually very collaborative, and we work, it's not like you throw it over the wall, it's in the next phase. We all work with each other, but you have very explicit responsibilities that if you don't do it, you're not holding up your end of the bargain, right? And then at Marketo, we've always done that. In a lot of companies, it's not like that. And that when you find a UX place that reports to product management, it might work in the beginning when they're really small, but then it will become really bad later. And most of the organizations I see do that, they suffer from there's poor UX problems. With that said, it's not 100%, and there's a lot of different varieties of that.